So, creative ideas solve existing problems. Creative ideas are built on things that already exist. Somebody sees the same thing everybody else sees, they just see it a little bit differently. They modify it, they add to it, they take something away. A whole new product line came from Coca-Cola when they took the sugar out. Diet Coke. Whole new product line. All they did was take out sugar. But it was creative and inventive. So, let's talk about how do we think creatively. One of the quotes I came across last year was this, that entrepreneurs develop a system of innovation. They develop a system of innovation. I spent the last year trying to figure out a system, a systematic way of thinking about things in order to learn to be more creative. And that's what I want to share with you today. And the reason I share it with you is because this is the kind of thinking that we're going to use throughout the year as we work with folks to redesign the association and to retask it to mobilize churches to take on lostness. So I just want to, we're trying to create a whole new culture around innovation and creativity, and this hopefully will become kind of the process, the technology that we'll use for thinking creatively. First, I said it begins with a problem, and then the next step is find out how others have solved that problem before you. After that, take what they've done and play around with the ideas, using them like ingredients that a chef might use to make a new creation. The next step is take time to think about it, pray about it, let it kind of ruminate in your mind. Don't rush too quickly to come up with an answer. And then formulate your thoughts into an idea. Give it structure, give it a metaphor, give it some form, and then analyze it. Look at it, and then see if you can do better. Start the process all over again. And eventually, come up with creative new ideas. Now, let me just kind of unpack that. First, define the problem. Identify your problem before you focus on a solution. Let me tell you one of the biggest mistakes that I know of. Folks tend to see a problem, and before they even think it through, they're already looking for a solution. And they're always looking for a solution based upon the way they've always solved it before. Now, it doesn't sound like a problem. Sometimes it's not. You go into a dark room. The way you've always solved the problem before is you flip on the light switch. You know, it's not always a problem. But sometimes it is. Because if you define the problem wrongly, then it's going to set you off in the wrong direction to try and find the answer. How you define the problem sets the pattern for the way you will develop the solution. Let me give you an example. Henry Ford wanted to make the least expensive car he possibly could so that anybody could buy a car. And his way of solving that was to create an assembly line process for making a single product, the Model T. Now, a really creative play on that idea, by the way, is Southwest Airlines. Southwest Airlines, who has only one kind of plane that they use. Henry Ford said, I'm going to make it inexpensively. It's going to be an assembly line process, and you can have any color Model T you want so long as it's what? Black. Yeah, because the way to make it as inexpensively as possible was to do the assembly line stuff, give them only one choice, and then produce the product. Now, if he had produced in different colors, if he had produced different body styles, if there were lots of options, that would increase the cost. He didn't want that. He was so committed to this that when he would have the manufacturers that would ship him parts, ship it in certain kinds of boxes pre-cut so that he could disassemble the boxes and use them as the floorboard in the car. He was absolutely committed to doing it as inexpensively as possible. Another guy came along by the name of Will Durant. Will Durant said, now listen to the difference. I want to make it possible for anyone to afford an automobile. Sounds like the same thing, doesn't it? Henry Ford said, I want to make a car as inexpensively as possible. Durant said, I want to make it possible for everybody to buy a car. And he went off in a totally different direction to solve his problem. Do you know what he created? GMAC. That's what it ultimately became. He created a credit plan that made it possible for people to buy a car on credit, pay for it in monthly installments so that they could afford a car. Now, what did that allow him to do? It allowed him to have much more diversity, much larger product line. And so he began to assemble different companies and ultimately created GM. Both men trying to solve a problem. How do we make it possible for people to have a car? One said make it as inexpensively as possible. The other said design a way so that they could afford to buy your product. How you define the problem determines the course you set off to solve it. So, the non-Christian population in Houston is increasing significantly faster than the Christian population. What's the problem? Is the problem we don't have enough churches? Is the problem that Christians aren't committed to sharing the gospel? Or is it that Christians don't know how to share the gospel? Or that they're afraid to share the gospel? Or we've created a culture of consumers that are only going to church for what they can get out of it and aren't really connected to the Great Commission. Well, how you define the problem ultimately determines how you start to look for an answer. Because if the answer is Christians don't know how to witness, then we create tools to help them learn how to witness. But if they're living in isolation and they don't have non-Christian encounters and friends and so forth, I don't care how well trained they are, they're not going to be sharing the gospel. How you solve the problem, how you define the problem determines how you try and solve the problem. So we got to begin with the right definition. So we're going to spend time working with groups of folks to try and figure out what is the problem, rather than just assuming that we already know. Secondly, find out how others have solved the problem. Borrow from others. Here was one of the most, for me, helpful insights of the whole year. Creative thinking is not about waiting for the next great idea. It's about going out and looking for it. It's about exploring. Find out what others have done to solve the problem. So once you've defined the problem, start figuring out how others have solved it. And the first place to look is look around you for people like yourself. What other churches are reaching the lost? Maybe not just Baptist churches, but what other churches are reaching the lost? How are they being reached on the mission field, as well as how are they being reached here at home? Find out what other churches are doing.